pharmacokinetics of inhalational anesthetics. Okay, so in this we are talking about the pharmacokinetics of the inhalational anesthetic specifically. Okay, there are two types of general anesthetic, the one which can be inhaled and another one can be administered by the parenteral route, injectable route. Okay, so coming to the pharmacokinetics of inhalational anesthetic. Okay, so as the name implies, these are supposed to be inhaled. So administration is through your inhalation, okay, or breathing. Okay, so the anesthetic is either in the form of gas or it is in the form of a vapor. Okay, so now these inhalational anesthetics, it is again of two types, gaseous and the liquid type. Okay, volatile liquids. Okay, so there is only one example which is gaseous in nature, that is nitrous oxide, and rest are volatile liquids. Volatile liquid meaning those which will vaporize very easily. Okay, so they are volatile in nature, so they get converted into vapors and those vapors are inhaled by the particular patient. Okay, so here the your anesthetic is in the form of a gas or a vapor. Okay, so it quickly diffuses across your pulmonary alveoli and tissue barrier. So when you inhale that anesthetic in the form of a gas or in the form of a vapor, okay, so it will quickly cross that alveolar membrane and reach your systemic circulation. Alveoli are highly supplied by blood circulation. Okay, so it is also important for your gaseous exchange, like your oxygen is taken up into the blood from the inhaled air, and the carbon dioxide which is generated in your body, it is exhaled out, it is given back to the alveolar air and it is then exhaled out. Okay, so the general anesthetic which is administered in the form of a gas or a vapor, this also will quickly cross the pulmonary alveoli which are found in your lungs. Okay, so these are the basic functional units where gaseous exchange is actually taking place. Okay, and also tissue barriers also can be very quickly crossed by these gases. Okay, so it depends upon the basic property. We shall see what is responsible for its passage across the membrane. Okay, now if you can see the depth of anesthesia, okay, now this depth of anesthesia, it depends upon the potency of the agent, and potency of this general anesthetic is governed by the MAC. Okay, so higher the potency of the agent, greater will be the depth of anesthesia which will be achieved. So also one more important factor governing the depth of anesthesia is its partial pressure in the brain, PP. Okay, it's a gas, okay, or a vapor. Any gas or a vapor pressure will have a partial pressure. Okay, every gas will exert its own pressure, and when there is a number of gases together, okay, so each gas will exert its own pressure, so that's known as a partial pressure of that particular gas. Okay, so here the partial pressure of this gas, okay, it's not determined in terms of concentration, but it's determined in terms of a partial pressure because it is a gas or a vapor in nature. Okay, so this partial pressure of this gas or vapor in the brain is very important. Okay, how much of it is entering your brain or how much is reaching your brain, that's very important because brain is the site of action. Okay, so higher the partial pressure of your gas or vapor, okay, that is your general anesthetic in the form of a gas or a vapor, greater will be the depth of anesthesia. So these are the two factors which are governing the depth of anesthesia. Now coming to the induction and recovery. Now induction meaning after administration your drug will enter your blood circulation, blood will take it to the brain. Okay, so once it reaches the brain, your general anesthetic will start acting. Okay, so it will start producing the anesthetic effect. Okay, so that particular phenomenon is known as induction of anesthesia. Okay, and recovery meaning recovery from the anesthesia, meaning once the operative procedures are over, you can stop the administration, the general anesthetic which has reached your brain, it will start coming out of the brain. Okay, so that particular process is known as recovery. The person will start gaining the consciousness. So that's known as the recovery from the general anesthesia. Now both this induction and recovery from the general anesthesia, both these will depend upon the rate of change of partial pressure in the brain. Okay, so if the partial pressure in the brain is increasing very quickly, induction also will take place very quickly. Once the partial pressure in the brain is decreasing, what will happen? Recovery will start. Okay, so this partial pressure of your anesthetic in brain is very important. Okay, so maintenance of this partial pressure or at a particular level in the brain is very important, which will govern the induction, maintenance as well as recovery from the anesthesia. Okay, now when anesthetic is administered, it has to cross particular barriers to reach up to the brain, right? So once when it is administered in the form of a gas which is inhaled by the person. So once it is inhaled along with the air during breathing, okay, during the inspiration, your general anesthetic will reach your alveoli. Okay, from alveoli it will easily cross the membrane depending upon its basic property. It will cross this alveolar wall and it will reach the blood. Okay, so that's how the gaseous exchange also take place of your oxygen, okay, and carbon dioxide. In the same way, your general anesthetic also will cross this alveolar wall and reach your blood circulation. From here, the blood will carry it will get pumped, it will go back to your heart will pump it, and the blood will go to all the vital organs again. Okay, so your general anesthetic will reach the brain, because brain, you all know that it is a highly perfused organ. Okay, so rapidly your general anesthetic will start entering into the brain. This is how it is reaching its site of action. Okay, now if you can see the arrows, it is not a one-way arrow which is shown. Okay, it's a two-way arrow, right? So it's a reversible process, or it is remaining in the form of an equilibrium. Okay, so there are gradients over here. Okay, the gradients for your partial pressure of your anesthetic. So when first time when you are administering this general anesthetic, there will be very high partial pressure in the alveoli. In the blood, the amount of your anesthetic will be 0 initially. So what will happen? Quickly your general anesthetic will come here. Okay, so it is having a very good gradient over here. So it will start entering the blood. So it will remain in equilibrium. Then again from blood, it will go enter into your brain very quickly. Okay, so again it will maintain a equilibrium over here also. Now supposing when you stop the administration, when you stop the inhalation of this gases or vapors of your general anesthetic, what will happen? All these gradients will reverse. Okay, that is your concentration of your general anesthetic in the alveoli will drop. Okay, so what will happen? There is a reverse gradient created now. So whatever is in the blood, it will start coming out in your alveoli. So once the concentration of your or partial pressure of your anesthetic will drop in the blood, whatever is there in the brain, that will also start coming out. Okay, from the brain it will come back into the blood. And if the partial pressure of your anesthetic in the brain drops below a particular level, the person will start recovering from the anesthesia. Okay, so the person will start gaining the consciousness, and the person will start gaining all the reflexes back, all the sensory perceptions the person will start gaining back. Okay, so that is to do with the recovery. Okay, so these are the gradients which are followed for the induction, as well as in the reverse direction it is followed for the recovery from the anesthesia. Okay, now let us see what are the factors. Now there are certain factors. Now for us, for the action of your general anesthetic, okay, that is for your maintenance of anesthesia, the maintenance of partial pressure of the anesthetic in the brain is very important. So a particular partial pressure of the anesthetic in the brain must be attained and it should be maintained. Okay, so now what are those factors which are affecting this partial pressure of anesthetic which is attained in the brain? Okay, so all these factors will govern the induction as well as the recovery as well as the elimination of your anesthetic from the body. That is, termination of action will be governed by all these factors. Coming to the first factor, that is partial pressure of anesthetic, partial pressure of the anesthetic in the inspired gas. Okay, now say this is a picture of your single alveolus which is shown over here. These are your alveoli. Okay, so it's a grape-like structure. So many alveoli which are attached to each other. Okay, so this is the functional unit, and this is the membrane. It is magnified over here. So this is your alveolus, and this is the blood vessel. So normally this is what is happening with your oxygen and carbon dioxide. So there is a diffusion of your oxygen from the alveolus into your blood vessel, and whatever carbon dioxide is present in your blood, it is diffusing into the alveolus, which is exhaled out. So this is what is normally taking place in your alveoli, okay, with your oxygen and carbon dioxide. This is a normal physiology. Okay, so now what is happening with your anesthetic? So when you administer your inhalational anesthetic in the form of a gas or a vapor, it will also reach here in the alveolus, right? So it will come here. Okay, so now what is the partial pressure of this anesthetic in this inspired gas which is coming here? That is very important. Okay, so higher the partial pressure of anesthetic reaching here in the alveolus, greater will be the entry of your anesthetic into the blood vessel, right? So these are all the blood vessels. Alveoli are highly supplied by blood capillaries. So exchange of gases will take place very effectively over here. So whenever there is high partial pressure of the anesthetic in the inspired gas, that is whatever you are inhaling. So if in that the partial pressure of your anesthetic is very high, if it is administered in a very high proportion, then obviously the gradient across over here will be very high. So quickly your general anesthetic will start entering into your blood circulation. Okay, so the greater the partial pressure in the inspired gas, faster will be the entry of your anesthetic in your blood circulation. So it will hasten the induction of the general anesthetic. Okay, so partial pressure in the inspired gas should be high. It will hasten the induction, or induction will become quick. The next factor is the pulmonary ventilation. Okay, now ventilation meaning the respiration or the breathing, okay, inhalation and exhalation which is taking place. Now supposing if your alveoli are hyperventilated, okay, that means if your rate of respiration is fast, okay, so if you are breathing in at a very faster rate, that is the number of times you are breathing per minute, it is fixed normally. Okay, so when you are exercising, what happens, or when you are carrying out some physical work, what happens to your respiration? It increases. Okay, obviously why? Because your body oxygen demand is increasing. Okay, so breathing or respiration rate is increasing so that more and more oxygen can be brought in. Okay, because your body oxygen demand is increasing. Okay, now supposing if there is hyperventilation, what will happen to the action of your general anesthetic? In case of hyperventilation, okay, that is increased rate of respiration. In case of hyperventilation, there will be more amount of anesthetic which will be brought to the alveoli per minute. Okay, so you will be breathing at a faster rate, so more and more anesthetic will be inhaled. So obviously it will result in the increase in the, or it will hasten the induction. Induction will become faster in case of hyperventilation because more and more anesthetic is swept in. Whereas what will happen in case of respiratory depression? If a person is suffering from respiratory depression, there will be decreased rate of respiration, or the breathing rate will be low. So what will happen to the amount of anesthetic which is coming into the alveoli will reduce, okay, in case of respiratory depression. So since less amount of anesthetic is being brought to the alveoli per minute, obviously the induction of the anesthesia also will be slowed down. So the rate of ventilation, the pulmonary ventilation, is very important in case of induction as well as in case of recovery also. Now the blood solubility also is also equally important over here. Okay, now supposing if the anesthetic has a very high blood solubility, okay, so it will take time for it to dissolve into the blood. Okay, so in that case, the minute volume, that is the amount of air which you are breathing in per minute, Okay, so that will determine the rate of induction, because your blood solubility is high, so it will take time for your drug to dissolve in the blood. So unless and until it is dissolving, the partial pressure of your anesthetic in the blood is not increasing, so it will slow down the induction. So in that case, the minute volume, that is your rate of respiration, will govern your minute volume. So that is very important factor again, especially for those drugs which are having high solubility in the blood. Coming to the alveolar exchange now. Now supposing normally when a gas comes here, exchange of the gases take place very effectively and very easily. Okay. Now supposing if there is any mismatch with the ventilation and perfusion. Now ventilation meaning what? Your respiration. Okay, you're breathing in and breathing out, inhalation and your exhalation. And perfusion meaning the blood supply coming to your lungs, that is to your alveoli. Okay, remember in the gaseous exchange, if there is any mismatch with the ventilation and the perfusion, what will happen? This gaseous exchange will not take place effectively. This is what you all have already studied in your respiratory system. Okay, so whenever there is any mismatch with this ventilation and perfusion, meaning at the time when you breathe the air in, at the time of your inhalation, at the same time blood should be pumped by your heart and the blood should come in these capillaries. At that time effective exchange of this oxygen and carbon dioxide will take place. That's what you all have studied. So the same is applicable with the general anesthetic also. Okay, supposing if there is any mismatch with this ventilation and perfusion, like what happens in case of emphysema, okay, which is a type of COPD. Okay, COPD is a condition wherein there is a mismatch in the ventilation and perfusion, meaning at the time when you are inhaling, at the same time the perfusion is not taking place, that is the blood is not coming in this particular region, or the blood is not being pumped in the alveoli. Okay, so there is a mismatch. So when your general anesthetic is reaching here in your alveoli, at the same time blood may not reach over here, so a well ventilated alveoli may not be well perfused. So what will happen? Your general anesthetic has attained a very high concentration over here, but the blood coming over here, it is not able to take up your general anesthetic. Okay, so vice versa is also possible. Say for example, your alveoli are well perfused, that is the perfusion is very good, the blood is coming in a good amount in these alveoli, but the ventilation is not proper. At that same time, if the inhalation does not take place, then also it will result in the or it will affect the entry of the general anesthetic in your blood circulation. So again over here your induction of the anesthesia and the recovery both will be slowed down if there is any mismatch with the ventilation and the perfusion, as occurs in case of emphysema. Okay. The next factor is solubility of anesthetic in the blood. Yeah, that's again a very important property, okay, which your anesthetic should have, which will determine the induction and the recovery both. Okay, now supposing if the anesthetic, it has a very high solubility, as I've already told you all earlier. Okay, say for example ether has a very high solubility in the blood. So in that case your drug should first dissolve in your blood for it to raise its partial pressure in the blood. So unless and until this partial pressure is raised in your blood, it will not be taken to your brain. Okay, so entry in the brain also will get affected, because here it is taking time for it to raise its partial pressure in the blood because of its high solubility. Okay, so that's a very important factor. So your anesthetic should have a low blood solubility so that it need not dissolve for it to increase its partial pressure in the blood. Okay, so those which are having low blood solubility, like say for example nitrous oxide, sevoflurane, desflurane, these are the anesthetics which induce very quickly, and the same factor also is governing the recovery also. Say for example if the solubility is less, So quickly, once the operations is over and once you stop administration, gradients will reverse, your drug will come out of brain and it will quickly enter the blood. If it has to dissolve, if it has high solubility, it will also take time for it to enter the blood. So recovery also will be slowed down. Okay, so in case of ether, the induction and recovery both are slow because it has high solubility in the blood. Whereas in case of these examples like nitrous oxide, sevoflurane, desflurane, they induce as well as recover very quickly because your blood solubility is low. Okay, and the factor which is governing the blood solubility is the blood gas partial coefficient. Okay, so it's the coefficient which is determining in which phase your anesthetic is remaining more, whether it is remaining dissolved more or whether it is remaining in the gaseous form. Okay, so that's a very important factor which is governing the induction as well as the recovery. Then coming to the next factor, that is solubility of anesthetic in the tissues. This is also very important. Now your site of action for the general anesthetic is the brain, right? So more of your general anesthetic should reach your brain. Now supposing if there is a general anesthetic which is entering into your tissues, what will happen? Your anesthetic will start entering in the tissue and it will remain over there. So less of general anesthetic will be available to reach the brain, which is actually the site of action. Okay, so its solubility into the tissue should not be very good. Okay, specifically those anesthetics which are highly lipid soluble ones, okay, like halothane. So what will happen over here? These will start entering into your adipose tissues. Because of lipid solubility, it will start entering into adipose tissue. These are lipoidal in nature. So it will quickly enter into your adipose tissues. So they will remain in these adipose tissues for a longer period of time. Okay, so and they also will leave these very slowly. So your drug, rather than entering in more amount in the brain, it is entering your adipose tissue. Now adipose tissue is not the site of action. So obviously the induction and recovery also will be slow in case of such agents which are highly lipid soluble and which starts entering into your adipose tissues. Okay. Now for the same reason, higher amount will be found in the white matter as compared to the grey matter. So there is differential concentration which is attained in the within the brain and the spinal cord also. So white matter, it will attain much higher concentration as compared to the grey matter. Okay. The next factor is cerebral blood flow. Okay, now blood flow to your brain, that will also determine the induction and the recovery. So higher the blood flowing to your brain, greater will be the induction of the anesthesia. Okay, now you can hasten this induction by following certain additional procedures, like say for example carbon dioxide inhalation. This will result in cerebral vasodilatation, meaning the blood vessels in your brain will start dilating. So more and more anesthetic will be carried towards your brain. Okay, so induction and recovery both will be accelerated when carbon dioxide is inhaled. Now another advantage of this carbon dioxide is that when carbon dioxide is inhaled, it will also stimulate the respiration, because you all are aware that when the body carbon dioxide goes high, the respiratory rate is increased, so that more and more oxygen is brought in and more carbon dioxide is removed out of the body. So again, carbon dioxide administration will also stimulate the rate of respiration, and we have seen that under the previous factors that the rate of respiration is very important. Ventilation is one more important factor. So more the rate of respiration, more the ventilation, more will be the amount of anesthetic which will be brought into your alveoli. So more of it will enter into your blood. So again, induction will be faster over here. So these are all the factors. Then coming to the elimination. Okay, so how the action of your general anesthetic is getting terminated and what are the factors. Okay, so elimination will start. Okay, now elimination, it constitutes together the metabolism as inactivation by metabolism as well as the excretion of the drug. Okay, so now how the elimination of your general anesthetic is taking place. Now supposing your general anesthesia is being instituted and the operation or the surgery is over. Okay, so the procedure to be carried out is over. So what you have to do, you have to just discontinue the administration of the anesthetic. Okay, so now once you discontinue the administration, these are the normal gradients. Okay, so this is how the anesthetic is entering into your brain. Okay, first it will come to the alveoli, then it will go to the blood and blood will take it to the brain. Okay, but when you discontinue the administration, so the entry point itself, you stop the administration, what will happen? The concentration in the alveoli will drop, so that whatever is present in the blood will come back in the alveoli, blood concentration will drop, so whatever is present in the brain, that will start coming out of the brain. So that's how the channels or the gradients, these are reversed. So now whatever the channel of absorption, the same one will act as a channel of elimination. Okay, so same pathway, whichever was followed for entry of your anesthetic at the site of action, the same one will get reversed and the same will become the channel of elimination. So it will act in the reverse direction. Okay, so all of these inhaled anesthetics, okay, these will be eliminated mainly through the lungs. Okay, so all the factors which we have seen so far, okay, those which are responsible for the induction, so same factors will also govern the recovery from the anesthesia also, where the gradients are reversed when you stop the administration of the drug. Okay, then the entry into the fatty tissues, that is also a very important one. Highly lipid soluble ones, okay, they will enter into the fatty tissues and they will remain persistent in the adipose tissues mainly for the longer period of time. So recovery from these such type of agents is slow to occur. Okay, and muscles, they occupy an intermediate position, okay, in between the blood and the adipose tissue. Okay, so much of anesthetic will not enter into the muscles. Okay. Now if you can see the metabolism part of general anesthetics, so most of the general anesthetics are eliminated in the unchanged form. Okay, only halothane is the one which is metabolized. More than 20% of it is metabolized in the liver. So rest of them are excreted out as such. So after induction is over, after procedure is over, gradients will reverse once you stop the administration and they will come out of the body as it is. Okay, and recovery, as I have already told you, recovery after the prolonged anesthesia, that will again depend upon the lipid solubility of the agent, the solubility of that agent into the blood also. The ones which are more lipid soluble will remain in the tissues in your body for a longer period of time. So they will be removed out of the body quite slowly. So this is to do with the pharmacokinetics part and the elimination. Now there is one small concept known as second gas effect and diffusion hypoxia. Now this is also very important. Okay, many times it has been asked in the exams, what is a second gas effect or what is diffusion hypoxia. Okay, now this two phenomena, these are two different phenomena, but they are discussed together because there are some reasons why they are discussed together, because same anesthetic is showing both these type of actions. Okay, so now this generally these two effects, these are shown by the inhalational type of anesthetics which are administered in a very high concentrations. Okay, so when a very high amount of anesthetic is inhaled, okay, what will happen is the partial pressure of your gas in the alveoli. Okay, so more amount of anesthetic will come over here, a very high amount of anesthetic will come over here, so it will completely replace the air which is present in your alveoli. Generally you are already aware that even during the exhalation, entire amount of air is not exhaled out. Okay, some amount of air will remain, otherwise your alveoli will collapse. Okay, but when an anesthetic is administered in a very high amount, all these air which is found in your alveoli, okay, in all the alveoli, it will be practically replaced by this mixture of this gas. Okay, generally it is given in the form of a mixture. We'll see why it is given in the form of a mixture. Okay, generally anesthetic, two anesthetics and oxygen is given along with it. Okay, so whenever a general anesthetic is administered in a very high amount, okay, so gradient will exist, a very high gradient will exist, so quickly it will start entering your blood circulation. Okay, so again here the amount of your anesthetic will drop. Okay, so again quickly fresh anesthetic will be sucked in. Okay, so there will be very rapid entry of your anesthetic over here. Okay, and your anesthetic will start entering your alveoli at a very fast rate. So gas flow will be higher than the tidal volume. That's the amount of air which you breathe in during your single breath. Okay, so the entry of your gas in your lungs will occur at a very faster rate. Okay, because it will be entering your blood at a very faster rate as its concentration or its partial pressure is very high over here. Okay, now this is significant only with one anesthetic, that is one inhalational anesthetic which is found in the gaseous form. Nitrous oxide is the only anesthetic which will show this type of phenomenon. That's because it is administered in a very high proportion, that is it is given in the form, or it is given in the amount of 70 to 80%. Okay, so that's a very high amount of anesthetic which is administered. So also its solubility in the blood is also very low, so it will quickly start entering into your blood. Okay, so it need not dissolve into the blood, so it will be quickly taken up by your blood which is present in around your alveoli. So your anesthetic is entering your alveoli at a very faster rate. If you can see, the rate is 1 liter per minute for nitrous oxide. It is entering at a rate of 1 liter per minute. You can imagine the rate at which it is entering in your alveoli. Okay, so here the gas flow is 1 liter per minute, higher than the minute volume. Okay, minute volume is the amount of air which you breathe in a one particular minute. Okay, so here entry of your nitrous oxide is occurring at a very fast rate, because it is administered in a very high amount. It will be entering in your blood at a very fast rate, so more and more anesthetic will be sucked in and it will come over here at a very fast rate. So it will enter in your blood circulation at a rate of 1 liter per minute. Okay, now supposing if you add one more potent anesthetic over here, potent anesthetic meaning here less amount of anesthetic is required, the potency of this anesthetic is high. Okay, say for example halothane, it is supposed to be administered only in the amount of 1 to 2%. Imagine over here nitrous oxide we have given in the amount of 70 to 80%. Okay, and halothane it is given in the percentage of 1 to 2%. Okay, supposing if you add this halothane to this nitrous oxide, what will happen? Now nitrous oxide is entering your circulation at a very fast rate, 1 liter per minute. Okay, so now this halothane which is added to this nitrous oxide, this also will start entering your circulation at the same rate, that is 1 liter per minute, higher than your minute volume. Okay, now why it is taking place? Because your nitrous oxide has increased the entry of your anesthetic, because it is administered in a very high amount, very high partial pressure of your nitrous oxide is present over here. So because of this it will enter your circulation at a faster rate. So when you add one more drug to this, or one more vapor, actually this is not found in a gaseous form, it is a liquid form. So it will vaporize and vapors are administered. So when halothane is added to this nitrous oxide, so nitrous oxide will carry this halothane at the same rate in your blood circulation. Though the amount of halothane is very low, but your nitrous oxide it is entering at a fast rate. So along with nitrous oxide, halothane is also entering your blood circulation at the same rate. So nitrous oxide is increasing the rate of entry of another potent general anesthetic in your blood circulation at a very fast rate, and this phenomenon is known as a second gas effect. Okay, so one more gas is carried along with it at a very fast rate. Imagine if you give this halothane individually in this amount, 1 to 2% of halothane, if it is coming to your alveoli, will it enter your blood circulation at the same rate, 1 liter per minute? Is it possible? No, it is not possible, because over here the amount of halothane is very, very low. So the concentration gradient against this alveolus and your blood, the concentration gradient is very low. So obviously what will happen, the rate of inflow of your halothane, entry into your blood circulation, will not be so much high, 1 liter per minute. It will not be so much when halothane is given alone. But when halothane is added with nitrous oxide, which is given in a very high amount, at that time halothane will be carried along with your nitrous oxide, and that will also start entering your blood circulation at the same rate. This phenomenon is known as second gas effect, and this is shown only by nitrous oxide. No other gas is administered, or no other vapor is administered with such a high concentration or such a high amount. That's why this phenomenon is shown only by nitrous oxide. Okay, so this is to do with the second gas effect. One gas is carrying another gas along with it, so it's known as a second gas effect. Okay, now there is one more phenomenon known as diffusion hypoxia. Now this diffusion hypoxia is also shown by nitrous oxide. Okay, now supposing you stop the administration of nitrous oxide, what will happen? When you discontinue the administration, whatever is coming into your alveoli, if you stop the entry in the alveoli, what will happen? The concentration gradient will drop. This is what we have seen under the kinetics. Okay, so concentration of your nitrous oxide will fall over here once you stop the treatment. Okay, so it will become, say, 0 it will become. Okay, practically it may not be possible, but say it will drop. So what will happen? There is a reverse gradient now. So your amount of nitrous oxide in the blood is high, and amount of nitrous oxide in the alveoli has dropped because you have stopped the administration. So inhalation of nitrous oxide is stopped now. So gradient will reverse, and whatever is present in the blood, it will quickly start entering your alveoli. Because what we have seen, nitrous oxide, it has very low blood solubility. So what will happen? It will diffuse back into your alveoli very quickly. From the blood, it will come out very easily. It will come back into your alveoli. So whatever air is present in your alveoli, it will be quickly replaced by your nitrous oxide. Whatever was there on in your blood and in your brain, it will start coming out very rapidly. Okay, because it has low solubility in the blood. So it will start coming out, and it will start occupying the entire air which is found in the alveolus. So when it replaces the air which is found in the alveolus, what will happen to the oxygen level in your alveoli? Obviously it will drop. The partial pressure of oxygen will drop in the alveoli, because nitrous oxide which was there in your blood, it is started coming back into your alveolus. Okay, so partial pressure of oxygen will drop over here, and that will result in the hypoxia. Okay, hypoxia meaning lack of oxygen. Now why this hypoxia has produced? Is the amount of oxygen less in the air? No, it is normal. Your breathing is also normal. But what has happened? Why this hypoxia has created? That's because of the back diffusion of your nitrous oxide into your alveolus. Okay, so that's why it is known as diffusion hypoxia. So this lack of oxygen is produced because of the diffusion of your nitrous oxide from your blood back into your alveolus. So that's why this hypoxia is produced, and that's why it is known as diffusion hypoxia, and it is shown only by nitrous oxide, because nitrous oxide is the only drug which is administered in the very high amount. So there will be very high amount of nitrous oxide in your blood. In case if any other drug is administered in a very low concentrations, 1 to 2%. Okay, so they will not be able to dilute the alveolus. Okay, say for example over here, other anesthetics which are administered in very low concentration, say 0.2 to 4%. So they cannot dilute your alveolar air by more than 1 to 2%. So there won't be any type of hypoxia which will be produced by other general anesthetic, other inhalational type of general anesthetic. It is shown only by the nitrous oxide. Okay, now this diffusion hypoxia, if the person's cardiopulmonary reserve is normal, then it will not have any deleterious effects on the person. Okay, but in case if the cardiopulmonary reserve is low, in that case it will be a problem. Say supposing if there is some problem with the respiration in the person, then obviously it will produce a problem, because the person may not be breathing oxygen adequately. After the nitrous oxide is discontinued, it will start replacing all the air in your alveoli, so that oxygen amount will be very low. So the person will not be able to cope up with that hypoxia if the cardiopulmonary reserve is low. Okay, so in such patients it will be quite dangerous. So what is done is, to be on the safer side, whenever nitrous oxide is used and whenever it is discontinued, the patient is continued on 100% oxygen inhalation for few minutes after the discontinuation of nitrous oxide. Immediately after the discontinuation, the person is not allowed to breathe the normal air. Okay, so straight away the person is not switched over to the normal air, but for some time 100% of oxygen inhalation is given to that particular person to avoid this diffusion hypoxia which is shown by nitrous oxide. Okay, so this is not significant with the other type of anesthetic if at all they are used. Okay, it is only significant with nitrous oxide because it is administered in a very high amount. Okay. Then coming to the next point, that is techniques of inhalation of anesthetics. Okay, so inhalation meaning your breathing in your anesthetic. Okay, now there are several techniques by which your anesthetic can be inhaled. Now obviously you will breathe it, okay, but there are different techniques or different kind of machineries and different procedures which are used for administration of your anesthetic by inhalational. Okay, so these techniques, these are selected depending upon the facility which is available, depending upon which type of general anesthetic you are using, the condition of the patient, the type and duration of the operation which is to be carried out. So all these are the factors which will govern which technique of inhalation of anesthetic you are using. Coming to the techniques, the first one is the open drop method. Here I have tried to draw a picture of a person who is lying down, okay, and there is a mask placed on the face of that particular person. Eyes are totally closed of that person, okay, because you are pouring your anesthetic over here. Now this type of technique is used for liquid type of anesthetic. Okay, so your inhalational anesthetic can be gaseous or liquid type. So out of that, liquid anesthetic can be administered by open drop method. Okay, open drop method. So that indicates what? You are pouring your anesthetic in the form of drops, okay, on a mask with a gauze which is placed on the mouth of that particular person, or the nose, which is covering the nose of that particular patient. So patient is lied down, okay, eyes are protected so that this anesthetic which you are pouring, okay, it should not accidentally enter into the eyes. So it is carefully poured onto the mask which is fitting the nose and mouth of that particular person with a gauze. Okay, so it is poured slowly. So what will happen? It will enter over here onto that mask with a gauze, and it will vaporize because they are volatile liquids. So they will vaporize. So those vapors which are formed, those will be inhaled by this particular person. Okay, and that's how the anesthesia is instituted, or it is administered to a particular person. Now there are several disadvantages with this particular method. Okay, no doubt there are certain advantages also, but there are many disadvantages with this, because you are pouring an anesthetic, it can pour onto the face of that particular person. So sores are possible, the skin may get damaged over here, that's a drawback. Then the vapors can also escape in the surrounding. So once the liquid is vaporized, okay, entire amount will not be inhaled by the person. So some amount will escape into the surroundings also. So it can be quite dangerous. So especially if that anesthetic is an inflammable one, there are chances of explosions. Okay, if there is any spark, explosions may take place, fire may take place. Okay, so it is quite dangerous. So also it is wasteful. So vapors all the vapors are not inhaled by the person, so some will escape into the air, so it's a wastage of your anesthetic. Okay, so it can be used only for cheap anesthetic, those which are cheap. Expensive anesthetics cannot be given by this method because it is wasting the anesthetic. Also those which are inflammable, highly inflammable valve, they cannot be given by open drop method. However, this is a simple technique, that's the advantage, and it does not require any specialized apparatus, so that's another advantage over here. Okay, so it is quite, it can be given by any person who is not very much skillful person. Any person can handle it over here. Okay, that is administration only. Okay, so this ether is the only drug which is preferred to be given by this method, especially in the children. Other the volatile liquids are not preferably given by this method. Then coming to the next method, that is through anesthetic machines. Okay, now here there are gas cylinders which will have your anesthetic, or specialized graduated vaporizers which will vaporize your volatile liquid. So vapors will be formed over here, and specific rubber tubings are available over here. So those vapors or that gas will travel only through those rubber tubings. So there won't be any wastage. Your general anesthetic is not going out. Okay, in specific techniques, but in certain techniques under this, of course, it is released, some amount is released in the surroundings also. We will see that. Flow meters are also there which will control the flow of your general anesthetic towards the patient. Unidirectional valves are there to prevent the reverse flow of your gases, and there is a reservoir bag also over here. So there is specific circuit which is available, so there will be a particular direction in which your anesthetic is moving. Okay, and your patient will have a mask. Okay, the patient will have a tightly fitting mask, face mask, or maybe endotracheal tube. Directly it is instituted inside your trachea, so that directly the anesthetic is going into your trachea, into your lungs. So there is no wastage over here. Okay, so let us see what are the different techniques under this. First one is the open system. Now open drop system was a different one, and this open system is something different. Over here machines are used, but why it is known open is because the exhaled gases, now the patient will inhale the anesthetic. Okay, a mixture of anesthetic and air will be allowed to inhale by the patient. Okay, but at the same time, once the gases are exhaled by that particular person, these gases are allowed to escape through the valves. Okay, so whatever the person is exhaling, that is allowed to escape out of the valve, and the next time the person is breathing in, a fresh mixture of anesthetic is drawn in. Okay, so fresh mixture of anesthetic is provided. The same air will not be breathed in by the particular person once it is exhaled. So over here no rebreathing is allowed. Rebreathing of the same air which the person has exhaled is not allowed. Flow rates are little bit higher and more amount of drug is consumed by the particular person. Okay, but here you can predetermine the amount of oxygen and anesthetic concentration which is being delivered to that particular person. Okay, so how much amount of oxygen and anesthetic is consumed by that particular person, you can determine it. So that's the advantage of this. Then coming to the next system, which is the closed system. Now closed system, as the name implies, closed system, meaning it is closed, totally it is a closed one. So over here the patient is rebreathing the same exhaled air, the same air which that person is exhaling out, the same air the person is rebreathing again. Okay, now before that same air reaches back to the patient through a particular circuit, it is passed through soda lime. Okay, soda lime, what it will do, it will absorb all the carbon dioxide which is exhaled by the particular person. Okay, so now to this circuit again further, after passing through soda lime, carbon dioxide will be absorbed. So your air which you have exhaled out, it will be free of carbon dioxide. Okay, and also you have consumed the oxygen and anesthetic also. So only as much oxygen and anesthetic which has been taken up by the patient, only that much amount of oxygen and anesthetic is added to that circuit, and that air again goes back to the patient. So same air is breathed by the patient, only thing is after exhalation it is passed through soda line to remove the carbon dioxide, and again in its way before it reaches the patient, oxygen and anesthetic is added to it. So it's a completely closed circuit. Okay, no air is allowed to escape in the surrounding over here. Okay, and here the flow rates are low. Okay, so these are also preferred for expensive and explosive type of agents, because here there is no wastage of the anesthetic, because nothing is allowed to go out of the circuit. Okay, so your anesthetic will not be given up into the surroundings. Okay, so there are chances, if there is any anesthetic which is explosive in nature, then you can follow this method. Okay, so there are less chances of accidents. Say for example, halothane, enflurane and isoflurane, these are given by this particular method. Okay, however the control of inhaled anesthetic concentration is imprecise over here. You will not precisely come to know how much of anesthetic is consumed by that particular person. And the third system is the semi-closed system. So here there will be partial range, so it will be in between open system and the closed system. Semi-closed, meaning here partial rebreathing of your same air will be allowed over here. So all the conditions are intermediate over here. Even the flow rate is also intermediate in between the open and the closed system. Okay, so this to do with the techniques of administration of